guys, how's it going? Just got back from a hunt last night and was successful in harvesting a small access deer buck. It's going to be a very tasty deer. Back on Maui, so we're doing a lot of access deer hunting along with other sports, but I just want to share some of my hunting tips and what I think will make you a more successful hunter. And when I'm saying this, I'm talking about big game hunting out west or spot and stock in general, not tree stand hunters in the Midwest. So that being said, what are the top priorities for me to be successful in getting it done, spot and stock? The first one is being physically fit, okay? If you're not physically fit, you cannot put in the miles to find the animals that you're trying to get to. And when you do find the animals and need to get to them and cover 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 miles on foot over hilly terrain, you need to be physically fit, okay? And then also, when you do harvest an animal out in the wild, like the first elk I ever shot was 5 miles away. It was a grueling and just a horrible experience, but if I didn't have the physical fitness to do that, I wouldn't have been able to save and harvest that animal. So being physically fit is going to be the number one on my list as far as being successful. So health, nutrition, endurance, stamina, all of that kind of goes under being physically fit. Okay, so that's the number one rule: be physically fit and you'll be more successful. Number two, in developing your game plan for finding animals in an area, is find a vantage point where you can spot from, whether it be with spotting scope or with binoculars, okay? My favorite times to spot are in the evenings. Mornings are good too, especially if you're elk hunting, because you'll get those early morning bugles before sunup. And if you can get to a vantage point before sunup and sit down in glass, you're gonna find those animals moving. Animals that aren't in the rut, evenings are a really good time to spot, especially if you're planning on making an approach in the evening. So you're watching bedding areas and you're sitting outside of them, downwind, of course, of these bedding areas, and spotting with binoculars and waiting for something to come out in movement. And then seeing where they are, letting them get into their feeding pattern, and then making your approach. So once you do find a animal that you want to pursue, and you've spotted them, now how do you get to that animal?
She's bedded right out in the middle of this open flat. I don't think I have a shot from over there, but there's the drainage comes up. There's a Kelly hump, kind of a dam on the back side of her. She's probably 50-60 yards from that. If I go all the way around, get in that drainage and come up that way, I might have a shot. Right here, she's facing this way, the wind's coming this way, but I go all the way around.
Okay, you look and assess all the terrain in between you and them and check the wind condition. How is the wind coming? Is it coming from right to left? Is it coming from left to right? Is it straight head on? Is it swirly? What's going to happen when you get in that dip? Is it going to kind of back up on you? There's many different wind situations. Knowing the wind is going to be your second most important approach method. So I might check the wind 20 or 30 times if it's super light on an approach. And I might stay out of that area until the wind's just perfect. And so using the wind to your advantage. And then also what I see a lot of hunters do, and is a huge mistake, is making shortcuts. They'll find an animal and they'll go straight at it. And they won't use the best approach, they'll use the most efficient approach for them. And that's not always the best case. So trying to put cover between you and the animal, whether it be a tree or a ridge, going around the backside of a mountain, whatever it is, to get underneath, downwind from that animal and come up in an approach. So use the terrain as much as possible. and then use the wind as much as possible. Okay, those are super important things when you're approaching an animal. And then when you start getting close, how noisy is it? Is the wind blowing a lot? Like we have trade winds here in Hawaii, so when it's really blowing, you could be a little bit more forgiving with your approach. You don't have to be completely stealth ninja-like. But if there's no wind, what do? I take off my shoes a lot of times. I'll stalk in my socks, and that allows me to feel every single little twig, leaf, anything underneath my foot. Whereas even if I have tennis shoes on, like last night I was wearing tennis shoes, even if I have those on, I can't feel all those things. And I'm breaking sticks and I'm crunching leaves and I'm making a lot more noise. So last night, for instance, the approach on this, cutting up a shank right here, last night on this approach, on this access deer buck, we saw him from about 200 yards away. And I made an approach in, checked the wind. The wind was coming at a certain angle, but then it was wrapping back up to him. The deer or the animals always put themselves in a position where they have the advantage. They like to have the wind coming at them from all angles because then they're not approachable, okay? And especially access deer, they're super wary and super skittish, and they're on high alert all the time. And they've been hunted before, so they know how to position themselves. And so last night on this approach, I was coming in, kind of slipping in at a certain downwind angle, and I was going to use all the terrain going right up to them. And I realized that the wind's just not good at that angle, that approach. It's going to end up, I'm going to get busted. I didn't have enough cover, visible cover in between me and him. I had about 40 yards where my last bit of cover was before he was. And so I backed out, slipped downwind a little bit further, used the terrain and the cover to get up almost like directly parallel to him in a crosswind position. So I wasn't downwind, I was more crosswind. And on that approach up, I had a lot of cover in between me and him. I had a lot of brush. And I couldn't see him, he was bedded, but I knew exactly where he was. And on my approach, kept on checking the wind, and I had this crosswind, but every once in a while I'd get a backdraft. And so the wind's kind of looping back up to him. So I had to stay out a certain distance so that wind didn't come back up to him. I had to stay cross and a little downwind. Anyway, I did this in my socks. And the littlest, I mean, you're tippy-toeing in like a ninja, and every little step matters. And there were a couple times where I crunched a couple dry leaves that broke, and I thought, man, I'm busted. Luckily, he didn't hear me, and I was able to get the shot off, put a perfect shot in him, and he went about 150 yards, and that was it. Anyway, so using the wind to your advantage, using the terrain to your advantage, don't take shortcuts to get in. Remember, you're in their bedroom, you're in their home, and so they have the advantage, and you have to outwit them and have to outsmart them. You'll have to crawl in sometimes on your hands and knees, and it can be grueling, but how bad do you want this animal? How bad do you want to be successful? That's what it really comes down to, is how bad do you want it? Being physically fit, spotting from advantage points, planning your approach, being stealthy as possible to get in there. And this is under the assumption that you have all of your equipment dialed and you're proficient in your shooting and you can shoot out to a certain distance. So I hope those tips help and you're more successful in your next hunt. And another little tip, this is the shank of the hind quarter. It is the most delicious part of the deer or elk. You end up slow cooking this in a crock pot for 8 to 10 hours. Look up recipes online, you'll find them. Absolutely amazing. All the connective tissues in here end up breaking down into collagen and just become like butter. Don't throw this away. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.